Imagine for just a second that you are holding this ancient, crumbling parchment scroll in your left hand. Like, you can literally feel the rough texture of the animal skin.
Right.
And it's this artifact filled with these heavy, sweeping prophetic declarations and millennial-old moral traditions. But then in your right hand, imagine you're holding your smartphone.
Right? Yeah, glowing with notifications and everything.
Exactly. It's open to your favorite digital streaming platform. So the question is, what happens when you crash those two completely different universes together?
Well, I mean, it creates a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Bringing those two extremes together, it just immediately challenges our baseline expectations of how spiritual information is, supposed to function.
Right, because we expect ancient wisdom to arrive, I don't know, covered in dust, requiring years of intense institutional study.
Exactly. And conversely, we expect our digital platforms to deliver like quick, fleeting entertainment. So when a movement weaponizes the latter to deliver the former,
It forces us to pay attention.
yeah, it really does.
And you're describing the exact landscape of BABASHUVA. This is a spiritual movement that didn't start centuries ago in some desert. I mean, it was founded incredibly recently.
Very recently, yeah. July 27th, 2018.
Right. By a figure recognized by his followers as the prophet Nathan or Ben Zvi.
Yeah.
And the ambition here is just massive.
It's global.
Yeah, global. BABASHUVA, which actually translates to a new world, a new reality, is attempting to bridge these traditional Jewish Tanakh or Bible values with, 21st century global concepts.
The goal, ultimately, is to guide people toward unconditional compassion and, tangible global change.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand a movement with that kind of global ambition, we really have to look closely at its architecture.
Yeah, we are stepping into this entirely objectively today, just really examining the framework of this theology to understand how it attempts to operate in the modern world.
And that framework relies on three very distinct pillars, doesn't it?
It does, and they do exactly what you described at the start. They crash the ancient into the modern. So the foundational pillar is the Jewish Tanakh.
The traditional Hebrew Bible.
Right. It acts as the ultimate moral anchor. It provides the heavy, non-negotiable guidelines for human behavior.
So that is the ancient parchment in our left hand. It's like, it's the classic foundational operating system for morality.
Yeah.
But, I mean, an ancient operating system needs a user interface that actually makes sense for today.
That's a great way to put it.
So how does BABASHUVA update that interface?
Well, the update comes through the second pillar, which is a foundational text simply titled BABASHUVA, A New World, A New Reality. Specifically, we're looking at the expanded 2024 edition.
Yeah.
And what makes this text so fascinating is, its mechanical function. It is written in a very rich, highly poetic and metaphorical style. It deliberately mimics the cadence of ancient biblical prophets.
So you feel like you're reading something unearthed from a cave.
Exactly. Yet the subject matter isn't ancient Babylon. I mean, it tackles contemporary psychological isolation, global conflicts, the anxieties of the modern era.
Wow, so it uses this ancient linguistic tool to dissect a totally modern disease.
Yeah, exactly.
Which brings us to the third pillar. And this is where that cognitive dissonance you mentioned earlier really kicks in. Because the third pillar of this entirely new religious framework is a Spotify channel.
Yeah, it's quite a pivot.
I mean, it's a series called Podcasts from Evan. We go from ancient Hebrew texts to a modern prophetic book, straight into an audio stream beamed directly into your earbuds while you're, stuck in commuter traffic.
Right, but the choice of medium is highly deliberate. The audio landscape of this podcast relies on the deeply soothing, almost hypnotic voice of a speaker named George Cate.
I noticed that. It's very relaxing.
Yeah, the production utilizes continuous, relaxing background music. The mechanical purpose here is to basically construct a spiritual oasis, because in a world dominated by frantic visual stimulation and all this aggressive digital noise, this soothing audio format attempts to bypass the nervous system's defense mechanisms.
Oh, wow. So it physically calms you down.
Yeah, it lowers the listener's heart rate to foster a state of really deep, uninterrupted introspection.
Well, let's look at what that soothing voice is actually, programming the listener to do. Because we understand the delivery mechanism now, the ancient text, the modern book, the Spotify Oasis. But what is the core software actually trying to execute?
Right. At the very center of BABASHUVA's ideology is this singular driving concept. Under the flesh, we are all human.
Under the flesh, we are all human.
Yeah. The movement insists that every physical, cultural, and religious difference that we obsess over is entirely superficial.
So the external meat suits and all the cultural baggage we carry are just irrelevant compared to a shared inner essence.
It is a radical leveling of the human playing field. But, stripping away all of those superficial layers leaves a very vulnerable core. So to protect and nurture that core, BABASHUVA demands its followers implement 4 highly specific, actionable values.
Okay, but wait, that sounds like a beautiful utopian idea, right? But how does the text actually translate that into daily human behavior? Does it offer a practical roadmap, or is it just a nice sentiment?
No, it's not about vague, feel-good utopianism at all. It requires a rigid behavioral shift. The first requirement is unconditional love.
Okay, but love is a tricky word, though. Because, unconditional love sounds beautiful, but it is ultimately an internal feeling.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to measure if someone is genuinely practicing unconditional love or just, projecting a polite exterior.
Which is exactly why the theology immediately pairs it with the second value, which is compassion.
Ah, okay.
In this framework, love provides the internal baseline, but compassion is the external, measurable action.
So how do they define compassion, then?
It's strictly defined as the active ability to identify someone else's suffering and take physical, tangible steps to ease it. Like, empathy without action is considered totally incomplete.
I see. So love is the engine and compassion is the transmission that actually moves the vehicle forward.
Perfect analogy. And that leads directly into the third value, which pushes the concept of action even further. It is grace, represented by the Hebrew concept of hesed.
Right, Hesed.
And while hesed often translates broadly to loving kindness, BABASHUVA enforces a very strict, almost uncomfortable definition of it.
Uncomfortable how?
It demands doing good. So, engaging in charity, giving away resources, volunteering your time with absolutely zero expectation of receiving anything in return.
Wait, zero expectation. That goes against almost every survival instinct human beings have developed.
Right.
Modern society is entirely transactional. I do this for you, you do this for me. We network, we build social capital. BABASHUVA is demanding its followers completely short-circuit that transactional instinct.
It requires a profound level of selflessness, and that selflessness is basically tested by the fourth value, mutual respect. This requires recognizing the inherent, undeniable value of every single individual you interact with.
Even the people whose superficial cultural or political beliefs directly oppose yours.
Especially them.
Wow, that is the real friction, isn't it?
Mm.
To look at someone you fundamentally disagree with and still apply unconditional love, active compassion, transactional-free grace, and mutual respect. That requires completely dismantling how the human brain naturally categorizes friends and enemies.
It does, and Nathan, or Bensby's theology, recognizes that friction. BABASHUVA essentially argues that you cannot simply decide to live by these 4 values while maintaining your current view of the universe.
Right.
To execute this new software, you have to wipe the hard drive. You have to adopt a radical shift in how you perceive reality, God, and your own mind.
And this architectural shift is laid out in 10 fundamental principles, correct?
Yes, 10 principles.
Okay, well, let's unpack the heavy structural beams of this theology.
Hmm.
We need to look at how BABASHUVA actually deconstructs reality.
Well, the deconstruction begins on familiar ground before taking a very sharp turn. The foundational theological stance is strict, unyielding monotheism. Principle 1 actively echoes the ancient Jewish declaration, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one."
So it's establishing the baseline. There's a singular, unifying, divine presence.
Right. But then Principle 2 immediately introduces a provocative paradox regarding that divine presence. It argues that God can neither be scientifically proven nor logically denied.
So the divine exists entirely outside the realm of human metrics.
Exactly. And because of this, Principle 3 makes a sweeping, really aggressive claim. It says that all existing institutional religious traditions in the world are completely mistaken in their understanding of God's true nature.
Wait, all of them? That is a staggering theological swing. It acknowledges the single God of the ancient texts, but simultaneously declares that every massive, centuries-old religious institution on Earth has fundamentally misunderstood the assignment.
Yep. And Principle 6 diagnoses this global misunderstanding as the illusion of belief.
The illusion of belief. What does that mean exactly?
It argues that when most mainstream believers claim to be worshiping God, they are actually just worshiping themselves.
Oh.
Yeah, it says they have constructed an idol made out of their own cultural biases, their own political desires, their own comfort zones, and they just slapped the label God on it. They have absolutely no real, tangible connection to the divine reality.
That is heavy. If every major religion is wrong and billions of people are trapped in this illusion of belief, basically worshiping a mirror instead of the divine, we have to ask a terrifying question. What is fundamentally broken inside of us that causes such a massive species-wide failure?
Well, BABASHUVA places the blame squarely on the human mind. Principle 4 states that because God is infinitely beyond human comprehension, our brains simply cannot process the reality of the divine.
Okay.
Therefore, Principle 5 arrives at one of the movement's most radical conclusions. It says the human intellect is the greatest deception.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how much pride humanity takes in its intellect, right? We built cities, we split the atom, we created the internet. We view our intellect as our supreme achievement.
Right, our crown jewel.
But this theology flips that completely. If the intellect is a deception, it's like trying to view the entire universe through a tiny, distorted keyhole. We think we see the whole room, but we're just looking at a speck of dust.
That's a great way to visualize it.
I mean, it is essentially functioning like a highly flawed AI algorithm.
Walk us through that mechanism, the AI metaphor.
Well, an AI algorithm is only as good as its training data, right? Our human intellect is trapped inside a physical skull, fed a highly limited stream of sensory data through our eyes and ears.
Right.
It takes that tiny trickle of incomplete data and confidently hallucinates an entire reality. It tells us this is exactly how the universe works. This is who your enemies are. This is what God wants. And because the intellect is so convincing, we just blindly accept the hallucination as absolute truth. We let this flawed algorithm dictate our lives.
Yeah, that AI hallucination metaphor captures the danger perfectly. The intellect creates a synthetic reality that feels utterly real, effectively blinding us to the actual truth. We become prisoners of our own highly limited processing power.
But if our primary tool for understanding the universe, our own brain, is fundamentally a hallucinating liar, how are we supposed to navigate? I mean, how do we determine what is real and what is just another layer of the illusion?
To solve that navigational crisis, Principle 7 draws a brutal, unyielding line between two different types of existence. It declares that tangible, physical reality, the earth you stand on, the literal flesh and blood human beings breathing in front of you, that is truth.
And the other side?
Conversely, the digital reality, the virtual spaces, the internet, the screens we stare into for hours, that is categorized as a literal lie or falsehood.
Wait, I have to throw a red flag on the play here.
I thought you might.
We are looking at a theology that claims digital reality is a falsehood, an extension of the intellect's deception. Yet, one of the three main pillars of faith of this entire movement is a Spotify podcast. Isn't it highly ironic? I mean, how do we reconcile using a digital lie to broadcast spiritual truth? You are essentially using the Matrix to broadcast a message telling people to unplug from the Matrix. How does the theology justify that glaring paradox?
It is a striking paradox, for sure, but it reveals the pragmatic mechanics of the movement. Think of it this way. If you accept the premise that humanity is currently trapped inside a burning building, the burning building being the digital intellectual hallucination,
Right.
you don't stand outside the building whispering. You break into the building's own PA system. The podcast, the digital audio stream, acts as a temporary, necessary mechanism.
Ah, I see.
It infiltrates the space where people are currently asleep. The soothing voice of George Cate doesn't ask you to worship the digital platform. It uses the platform to calm the frantic, hallucinating intellect just long enough to point you back toward the physical truth.
So it's a Trojan horse of ancient morality hidden inside a modern digital delivery system. The digital tool is basically meant to self-destruct once the listener wakes up to the physical reality of the human sitting next to them.
Precisely. But recognizing that truth requires someone to build the Trojan horse in the first place, Someone has to see past the intellect's deception.
Which brings us to the movement's understanding of prophecy.
Right. Principles 8, 9, and 10. BABASHUVA completely redefines the prophetic experience. We often imagine prophecy as this moment of peaceful, glowing enlightenment sitting under a tree.
Yeah.
But Principle 8 states that true prophecy is often the result of intense, incredibly difficult mental experiences. It occurs in individuals who face severe mental challenges.
Which honestly makes psychological sense within their framework. If the intellect is constantly fighting to maintain its comfortable hallucination, breaking through that deception would not be peaceful.
No.
It would be a violent, traumatic tearing away of everything the brain thinks it knows.
Exactly. The psychological turbulence is the cost of bypassing the intellect. And within this framework, Principle 9 establishes Nathan or Ben-Zvi as a true prophet conveying God's authentic words.
Having endured that tearing away.
Yes. And impartially, the text notes that while he conveys the truth, mainstream rabbis and institutional leaders are broadcasting lies and are not speaking truthfully in God's name.
That is a direct challenge to centuries of established religious authority. It is drawing a very heavy line in the sand.
It is. And finally, Principle 10 reveals the gravity of the message. This movement doesn't exist simply to promote a nice, harmonious lifestyle. Nathan Orr's prophecy relates directly to God's immense wrath upon the world and its great sins.
There is a palpable apocalyptic weight driving this message.
The timeline is very urgent.
Well, let's gather the pieces of this puzzle, because we are looking at a highly complex theological machine here.
We really are.
We have the illusion of belief, blinding billions. We have the human intellect functioning as a deceptive AI, hallucinating a false reality.
Right.
We have the digital world acting as a massive lie, which the movement actively hijacks via Spotify to deliver its message.
Right.
We have the traumatic, turbulent nature of prophecy breaking through the noise, and the overarching threat of divine wrath. So after absorbing all of that heavy deconstructive architecture, what does BABASHUVA actually want to build?
Well, the end game is surprisingly grounded. Despite the apocalyptic weight and the intense deconstruction of the mind, the ultimate vision is highly constructive. The movement does not advocate for running away to a mountaintop or, isolating from society.
Okay, so what do they want?
It demands the building of a supportive, tangible, spiritual, and moral community. A community strictly governed by the original Tanakh principles we discussed at the start.
So they're grounding the abstract theology into physical daily actions.
Exactly. It includes continuous Torah study, but that study must translate into applying actual justice in daily life and promoting global peace. Crucially, the sources note that caring for the environment and the earth is considered a core spiritual value of the religion.
Oh, that brings the physical versus digital dichotomy full circle. Because if the digital world is a lie and the physical world is the only changeable truth we have left to connect us to the divine, then destroying the physical environment is literally destroying the foundation of truth.
Yes.
Ecology isn't a political side project for them. It is a theological necessity.
It binds the entire system together. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ideology of under the flesh we are all human is ultimately meant to solve real bleeding societal conflicts.
Yeah?
By systematically breaking down the deceptive intellect, bypassing the digital noise, and recognizing our shared physical essence, BABASHUVA attempts to forge a synthesis. It takes the heavy moral demands of ancient traditions and forces them to answer the desperate need for modern global cooperation.
So to summarize this deep dive into the architecture of BABASHUVA, we are looking at a modern spiritual framework that aggressively challenges the status quo.
Very aggressively.
It utilizes the ancient moral code of the Hebrew Bible, couples it with the contemporary prophetic writings of Nathan or Ben-Zvi, and delivers the medicine through the soothing, modern audio drip of podcasts from heaven.
Yes.
It is a system built to infiltrate the digital illusions and the intellectual deceptions of our daily lives, simply to remind us of the one reality we keep forgetting, our shared, vulnerable, physical humanity.
It is a profound challenge to our modern arrogance. It demands we question the very tools, our minds and our screens, that we rely on to define our existence.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? You don't have to adopt the theology of BABASHUVA or accept its sweeping critique of mainstream religion to really feel the weight of its central argument.
No, you don't.
I mean, we live in a world hyper-fragmented by digital algorithms that profit off our outrage. We're divided by superficial cultural borders and endless political shadows. It is. The demand to strip all of that away, to look at the person across from you and offer unconditional compassion and expectation-free grace, is a deeply disruptive, highly necessary challenge.
It forces a mirror up to how much of our reality is just a comfortable, manufactured illusion.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Consider the AI hallucination we discussed earlier. If the human intellect is truly our greatest deception, constantly feeding us flawed data about who we are and who our enemies are, how much of your daily anxiety is entirely fabricated? I mean, how much of the prejudice, the stress, and the interpersonal conflict in your life is just a product of your own mind lying to you? If we could somehow manage to stop trusting our own anxious, over-intellectualizing brains quite so much, might we actually find it a whole lot easier to finally see that, under the flesh, we are all human? Think about that the next time you feel your pulse rising while staring into the glowing lie of a digital screen, desperately searching for something real.